External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is currently on an official visit to Iran. And due to reasons of global supply chain security, the visit is extremely important for India. The visit comes in the middle of continuous strikes against commercial vessels, with an Iranian-made kamikaze drone even striking off the coast of Gujarat. Other areas of interest include the Chabahar port, to which end India and Iran have now signed a deal to keep the development of the port going. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar also touched upon the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza at the moment, while reiterating India's stand that there is a need for humanitarian access to Gaza. What was more interesting is that India has called it a visible humanitarian crisis. Well, the big question is how this affects India's tightrope stance remains to be seen. And we will talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Joyita Basu, editor of the Sunday Guardian. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former diplomat, also joins me on the show. Dr. Velavat, foreign affairs expert, with me on the program too. Last but by no means the least, Pathikrit Pain, foreign affairs expert, with us on the show as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, ma'am, I'll begin with you. Well, this is perhaps also a test of India's diplomacy. It can also be considered as an epitome or a case study in how India is going to dabble with these varying issues, where we want to in fact appear to be balanced, just, and not antagonize anyone just for the sake of it.
Well, my response is that India's foreign policy is based on India's core national interests. Neither can India change its geography. Iran is a very important country, and we have historical ties, and we cannot be in a situation where we cannot deal or dialogue with the Iranians. Under those circumstances, I think that we have the sovereign right as a nation to dialogue with whoever we wish to. That has been done particularly with all major powers all the time. If you look at the US policy towards China, the United States, while making many statements, then flies its top officials and ministers all the way to Beijing to dialogue with Beijing. And why not, if it's in the American national interest? It may not be in India's national interest, but I don't think the Americans care about that. Similarly, we should look at our national interest. If it is in our interest to dialogue with the Iranians, we will do that. And I think that we have many important issues to discuss with the Iranians bilaterally and with regard to the regional problems that we are presently facing, including with the attacks by the Houthis, who allegedly are being supported by the Iranians in the Red Sea. These are issues of vital importance to India because we are dependent on fuel imports, and therefore I think that his visit is perfectly normal and probably the best thing that can happen, because there are many issues that our external affairs minister can take up with Iran, also on the basis of other countries who are close to India, but who do not have the same relationship that India has with Iran. So I see no difficulty in this visit. In fact, I look forward to hearing about the outcome whenever the visit is over. Then.
Joyita, your perspective on this. Obviously, India's foreign policy is guided by our national interest, but Israel is an ally. It has been in the past as well. And yet, we have to make sure that agendas which concern us, despite our proximity with Israel, continue to be a priority.
Well, I think the statements that have been issued from Tehran make things very clear. They say that, India, the terrorism, we oppose all sorts of terrorism. And when you're talking about terrorism, obviously the reference is to the Hamas. But at the same time, civilian suffering cannot be accepted. So I think India, I would say, whatever statement has been issued from Tehran, it's very balanced, and it is in keeping with whatever India's policy is regarding West Asia. You see, the problem I have seen is that it happens, there is one particular thought where they are only or supposed to only talk about Palestinian suffering, and because Israel is supposed to be a quote unquote colonizing power, So you are not going to talk, you know, whatever they may be suffering, that cannot be talked about. Sorry, that cannot also happen, can it? You know, I mean, whatever Israel suffered on October 7th, it was absolutely inhuman, and that cannot even be qualified or justified by saying, oh, you see, whatever the kind of things that they have been perpetrating on the Palestinians, that justifies the killing, which I am sorry to say, I have heard certain people in the foreign policy, our external affairs establishment, trying to justify that. Sorry, as a, I mean, you know, normal civilized human being, I find that very difficult to accept that you can justify whatever happened on October 7th by saying that whatever is, by qualifying it with the Palestinian suffering. Having said that, when you are looking at a situation, what we need right now is a ceasefire, what we need now is a cessation of violence, but the thing is, how that can be achieved, that of course, you know, that's a different issue. But just because India has come out in support of Israel, India has come out in support of a country that suffered in the hands of terrorists. Okay, so that is what, and that is what India as a country which suffers in the at the hands of terrorists, it's but natural that would be India's response, and that's what India did. So the whole point is, now here you see our support, quote unquote so-called support for Israel, are being used by certain countries in the Islamic world by saying that, you know, oh, your support for Israel kind of disqualifies you for you know, from getting our support in certain areas. I mean, Maldives is using it, of all places, a tiny little country like Maldives. In Qatar also, when this judgment was given, we were told that initial death penalty was given to our sailors who are ex-Navy personnel who are jailed there. Initially the court said, oh, they were spying for Israel. That was the verdict. So basically, let's face it, while we, just as Israel has to understand, realize that India is going to follow its national interest, the Islamic world also will have to realize that India will follow its national interest. Simple as that.
Dr. Rawat, how do you see this this situation? Is it complicated to you? Is this something which you know, requires the Indian nod time and again?
Well, I think the Indian relation with any country based on Indian sovereign interest, that is for sure. So the bilateral relation between India and Iran is based on the mutual understanding and the mutual benefit of both the nations. So I think India is a rapprochement with Iran, despite the American pressure, has been maintained that India will retain its own geographical, strategical importance, including their relation with Iran in terms of the oil and gas import, in terms of the Chabahar, in terms of the regional development, whether it is in Afghanistan, whether it's in the Persian Gulf or in the Red Sea. But having said that, I would say that the development, of course, in West Asia is also of a great concern to India, because India considered to be a stakeholder of any development there, because Indian food security, oil security, and the diaspora is of a prime importance for India in terms of interest. So therefore, I think Iran can play a major role, and such kind of visit will only cement the ties between the two countries and bring Indian interest and concern to the subject where Iran can use its influence. I wouldn't say that it has anything to do with India's position on Palestine or in the Israeli conflict, because that's we do not fall into those kind of a trap. We understand India's position. Everybody in the region knows India's stance on the Palestinian or in the war currently. So I don't see that is an issue currently. What is the issue for India is Chabahar. What is the issue for India is the fast approachment between China and Iran, and India wanted to save its own interests. So let it be that way, actually.
Right, Pathikrit, the External Affairs Minister is there, and you know, there is also an escalation of tensions and friction between Israel and its adversaries at its borders, and Iran happens to be, you know, a facilitator of some of this tension. Once again, I'll reiterate and use the same word, that this is a difficult situation that India finds itself in. Most of our panelists concur, and of course this is a very commonsensical thing to do as well, that we will be guided by our national interest, but so will these other countries also.
Oh, Vineet, first of all, it is a difficult situation, but at the same time, it is an advantage for India because we have not taken names. We have not directly accused Iran for whatever has been happening and what the Houthis have been doing. Look, there are telltale signs that whether it's Hezbollah or Houthis or the Hamas, the logistical or the military arsenal that they use, especially the Houthis, the kind of drones they use, the loitering munitions, they are of Iranian origin. There is no denial of that. They have been used against UAE and Saudi, refineries and other installations as well. But the advantage that India has is that India did not join the Prosperity Guardian, which is a maritime security initiative by United States to guard the whole Red Sea region, and where they have been launching counterattacks on the Houthis. So I think India, in spite of not joining that initiative, have deployed around a dozen warships, frontline warships. So I think when this discussion would happen with Iran, I think we will not be able to come to know about what happened in that internal discussions. But I'm sure the Indians will make it very clear that we do not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. When it comes to our maritime security and the security of the maritime routes, if they get harmed or attacked like this, the Indian ships or ships bound for India, then I think India does have the wherewithal to counter it with all its might. It may not be a war, but countering the Houthis. So I think it will be told to the Iranians that it's better you do the needful rather than we doing the same thing. The other thing is very important to understand. It's not just about what's happening in Palestine. The India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor cannot happen till the time the Abraham Accord is completely finalized. And there are reservations which is said. Like Iran is against that. So that is something that will be taken up because India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor is very crucial for India. At the same time, what would also be discussed, and this can be used as a bait, is the international north-south transport corridor from Russia to India, where the Chabahar port integration will play a very critical role, and Iran benefits out of it. Therefore, what India might tell over there is that, look, whether it is the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor or the Indian, international north-south transport corridor, it can be a win-win situation for both Middle East, Russia, Central Asia, and India if Iran agrees to it. And let me tell you, the recent visit of the president of UAE was also very critical because countries like UAE and Saudis, even though some recent reproach might have happened, they face major threat from either the Houthis or other organizations and perhaps even from Iran. So I think maintaining tranquility is important. I think Iran also understands that India has maintained the independence of its foreign policy and has not become a lackey of the United States. Another very important issue that we must keep in mind is the telephonic conversation that Prime Minister of India had with the President of Russia yesterday. There are important issues that will be discussed. Number one is that, because of the CAATSA sanctions and Iran exiting the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal, we've stopped taking oil from Iran. And that has not helped us at all because Iran completely started selling the entire oil to China, and Chinese have a stranglehold on Iran today. So I think there can be, initiation of dialogues on this issue, that because in spite of the American sanctions, we defied it and took oil from the Russians. You never know. We can start taking oil from Iran all over again, maybe not today, but 6 months down the line. And that entire transaction can happen in a rupee currency. So the advantage that India has is that it maintains the independence of its foreign policy. We have not joined any maritime US-led initiative. We can start taking oil from Iran. We play a critical role in making sure the international north-south transport corridor again works. And we are the only country which Iran might listen to on making sure that the India-Middle East-Europe corridor, economic corridor, if the Iranians have any reservation, it can be, taken care of in due course of time. So I think a lot of countries like Saudis and the UAE are looking up to this visit, but Iran will also may have to mend its ways. Just because we have good relation with them doesn't mean that the Houthis have the right to do what they're doing. And, Houthis on their own doesn't have the wherewithal to do what they're doing unless there are major support coming from Iran. So I'm sure there will be a lot of tough talking, but at the same time, Like mature countries, this will not come out most of the time. It will be kept inside. I think the Americans, beyond the point, they may not have an option but to escalate and counter the Houthis. But the Cold War is taking the shape of a proxy war. It has already taken. It might become a full-fledged kinetic exchange of, weapon systems if things are not brought down under control right now. The only country that can do it is India because it has maintained the independence of foreign policy. Let's hope how it works out. But it is a complex situation. But there are certain, as I said, certain things that India has in its hand, which might make Iran understand the issue, which can be beneficial for Iran as well. As I stated, the oil deal and the international North-South transport corridor, in which the Russians are also very much interested. Back to you,
Mukherjee, how do you respond to the stellar, articulation that Pathakrit has done? Obviously, he's put things into perspective that, what is being appreciated here is the neutral, the standalone foreign policy that India has. But at the same time, terror is something that India has always spoken against.
First of all, as far as getting oil from Russia is concerned, we never defied the sanctions. We worked out a very smart way of getting oil from Russia because there was nothing in the sanctions imposed on Russian oil which prevented a third party from buying crude, refining it in Indian refineries and selling it to a third party. And in fact, it was within the EU regulations, and that is what External Affairs Minister pointed out when it was raised with him by the head of the EU, that we have actually worked totally within the framework of European Union regulations. If they wanted to work better, then they have to change their laws. We have not defied, we have done it legally. That is not the same as buying oil from Iran. We stopped buying oil from Iran because it became impossible for us to pay in rupees because of the sanctions which had been put in place on Iran, which were very effective, which made it impossible for us to continue to buy it in rupees, which is why I do not see any oil deal with Iran coming through. Number one. Number two, there is no doubt that Iran is today part of an anti-Western alliance, including with Turkey, with whom we do not have the best of relations at the moment for various reasons. And therefore, going to Iran bilaterally to discuss important bilateral issues and to ascertain whether it would be possible to prevent a wider conflagration in this region is different from India throwing in its full support with Iran for the simple reason that the strategic autonomy practiced by India in its foreign policy sees India allied with a coalition of countries, including in the Quad, who have a completely different perspective with regard to Iran's foreign policies. Therefore, when I gave my first intervention, I explained that since our foreign policy is based on core national interests and on strategic autonomy, nobody should criticize us that our External Affairs Minister has gone to Iran for a bilateral visit. That is our right as a sovereign country. What we are discussing is hardly likely to figure much of it in the public domain, and in my perspective, it should not. If it results in a cooling down of some of the Houthi activity, that would be all for the best. There have also been drone attacks on Indian ships in the northern Arabian Sea, which is of great concern to us. We do have the Indian Navy, its warships, patrolling this area, and that may or may not one day result in a conflict with the Houthis, with their small vessels who come and go, because we have also conducted anti-piracy operations for a long time in this region with other Western countries. We're not part of a formal Western alliance, but we certainly do not want a situation to develop by which the oil tankers go by a longer route, which would make it much more expensive for India to buy that oil. It would also result in our falling back on our old ally, the Russian Federation, from whom we get the crude, refine it, and sell it to the European Union. As a matter of fact, they are one of the largest buyers of our Russian crude, which we have refined in our refinery. That is exactly the way foreign policy develops, and that is the way it's going to happen in the future. We're going to go by core national interests, and we have to tell the Iranians how we will that we do not approve of their fighting a proxy war in the Red Sea in this manner.
Actually, ma'am. All right. Well, we've run out of time. Joyita, concluding thoughts from you and Dr. Awad, and then we wrap up.
Well, the thing is that when you are looking at the situation, it's obviously about India's independent foreign policy, and I don't see any reason why any country should be having any problems about whether India is dealing with Iran or not. If you remember already, I think during President Trump's time, India was given special concessions when it was buying oil from Iran. And if you are looking at the US's index of rogue regimes and all, right now Russia, Mr. Putin is right on top, and Iran is perhaps not at that level. So as a result of which, if US and all the Western countries, I mean, if US I think has reopened started buying oil from Russia again. So if they can, look at India and say that yes, it is there. I mean, our relationship with the West and our relationship with these countries, Iran or for that matter Russia, they are independent of each other. So I don't see why there should be a problem with this visit. Yes, there are certain op-ed writers and all opinion writers, they will be writing nasty things, but then they write even nasty things. Even I was reading in one of the British newspapers, they have a problem even with Mr. Modi going to Lakshadweep. Okay, so the whole point is that if you are looking at that so-called civil society and the press and all, they will keep writing nonsense as long as it does not affect relations at the government's level, at the country-to-country level. And I don't see any reason why it should happen. This is fine.
All right, Dr. Awad. Sir, I can't hear you.
It is.
There you go.
If we look at the current situation between Israel and the Palestinian and the carnage happening in Palestine, that's the main reason for the American coalition that they have come forward to ensure that Israel continue its carnage on the Palestinians. So therefore, when they are present in the Red Sea, it's a matter also of concern because they are knowing that the Houthi can strike against Israeli target because they said we will keep on targeting Israel as long as they're attacking the Palestinians. So I think the Americans are trying to widen the regional wars. They are going to close the Bab al-Mandeb because that's where the Americans have been on this issue for years. They wanted to make Aden to Djibouti a military kind of a bridge where they can control the global and the oil trade. So Indian interest in Chabahar and the north-south corridors is of a prime importance that India has to look at its own interest from the Chabahar into the CIS country and into the Europe through the Russia and through Iran.
Vinit, can I just 30 seconds?
Quickly, Pathikrit, we have run out of time.
In 2017 and 18, CAATSA sanctions were imposed both on Russia and Iran, countering American adversaries to Sanctions Act. We stopped taking oil from Iran, but we defied the sanctions to take S-400 from Russia. So, and we also consume Russian oil. We are not just selling it to the Europeans. So I think if Iran is pushing countries to become part of the entire economic activities all over again, and so that sanctions are taken away, I think it's a bargaining chip that the Iranians are using. If they are included all over again, at least partially, India can play a role in that. Then I think a lot of tension in Middle East will come down. Oil is a bargaining chip that Iran might be playing, and India might be willing to reconsider. It's not a completely closed thing in geopolitics. A lot of things happen. We have to see how it works out. Venezuela was a rogue state. It's no more. The Americans are buying from them all over again. Vinny.
All right. On that note, we dip into a short break, but definitely a sensitive issue where India has to walk a tightrope and make sure that no sensitivities are offended.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.